The paintwork of the car is moderately soft and holds up well, with the exception of the plastic elements of the body. So, for example, the varnish from the front bumper could begin to peel off after a couple of years of operation. Synths are not much better with chrome elements, company emblem, lower grille lining and PTF lining. After a couple of winters they become cloudy, and then they begin to peel off. Over time, in places where the seals come into contact with the body, the paint wears off to metal. This problem is unpleasant but not critical. It is eliminated by passing problem areas with the protective film. I wrote how to do it myself in the article. Over the years, problems may arise with the corrosion resistance of the body, especially if the car is operated in a metropolis where in winter I generously sprinkle roads with chemicals. Despite this, it is impossible to say that the body of the car is very rotting, and no one has ever attributed into the number of problematic ones. The fastest mushrooms appear on the thresholds, wheel arches and hood. Also at risk is a niche under the windshield, bottom hinges, spars, a junction of spears and a motor shield. These pieces are not galvanized. Among other troubles of Renault Fluence, one can note the unreliability of the lock limit switches and the sagging of the hinges of the rear doors and trunk. Over time, the door locks begin to creak. It is eliminated by lubrication, and by 60–80,000 kilometers, the rollers in the door opening limiters are erased, clicks appear. If an unpleasant ringing is heard in the cabin while driving, check the condition of the aluminum button protection. It often bends and knocks on the muffler. The windshield is sensitive to temperature changes, may burst. Therefore, in severe frost, it is not recommended to turn on the glass heating until the interior warm up at least a little. If the car is equipped with a rain sensor, then when replacing the glass, it is available to buy a new sensor, since after replacement, air bubbles may appear under the lens. Renault Fluence has a wide range of gasoline and diesel engines with good dynamics and economy. Gasoline 1.6, 106 and 116 liters, 2.0, 138 and 143, and diesel 1.5, 86, 105 and 110 horsepower. The 1.6 K4M engine is well known to fans of the brand for the Logan, Clio and Megane models. The most common problems owners face is the failure of the phase regulator. As a rule, the disease manifests itself after 120,000 kilometers of run, so it is recommended to change the phase regulator with every second timing belt replacement. In the initial stage, the disease is manifested by a characteristic crack. If the problem is not correct, traction will worsen in the future, and interruptions in engine operation are also possible. A feature of this motor is a difficult start after a long stop in the cold season. When contacting a service, first of all, dealers offer to update the engine control unit software, replace spark plugs and clean the throttle body. Unfortunately, this procedure do not always help to fix the problem. Often, starting difficulties are caused by a malfunction of the starter fuse and solenoid relay, and sometimes the starter itself, as well as the use of low-quality fuel. It's worth mentioning such common troubles as triple and floating revolutions. In the first case, the culprits may be ignition coil, injectors and spark plugs with high millage. You need to check the compression. In the second case, the crankshaft position sensor and the ignition coil are most often to blame. The thermostat of this power unit rarely serves more than 80,000 kilometers, then it starts to leak and wedge. You should not delay replacing it, as this can lead to mixing of oil with antifreeze. The fuel level sensor is also not famous for its reliability. It changes as an assembly with the fuel pump. From 120,000 to 200,000 kilometers, it is less reliable. The most unpleasant problem is oil consumption, which appears on a run of 120–150,000 kilometers. In addition, in severe frost, the engine has problems starting and may stall at idle. Most likely, the ignition block relay needs to be replaced. Experienced owners of cars with such an engine have already gotten used to this problem. They change candles more often, and during startup they work with the glass pedal. This improves the situation a little, but in general, this is an unpleasant feature of the engine. Of the less significant troubles, a relatively small resource of engine mounts, vibrations appear, and burnout of the exhaust pipe ring can be noted. A 2-liter engine is more common on popular Nissan cars, Tiana, Qashqai, X-Trail, than on Renault. Of the common malfunctions of this engine, it can be noted: increased oil consumption. Most often the problem is caused by a large amount of carbon deposits in the cylinders, of severe wear of the oil scraper rings. A small resource of the timing chain. When it is stretched, dips appear during sharp acceleration, dynamics deteriorate, idle speed float. Often the owners are bothered by unstable idling. It is eliminated by cleaning the throttle. Over time, the alternator belt begins to whistle. If there is no time to replace the belt, you can try to tighten it. Of the less common malfunctions, it is worth noting the problem of cracking the cylinder head. If cracks have already appeared on the block, it is important when charging the candles not to apply a lot of effort when tightening. Otherwise, the cracks will go along the thread, the engine will start to triple and the disease will progress. If there is a problem in the spark plug well, usually the first one, a lot of antifreeze accumulates. Treatment: replacement of the block head. In general, this engine can be safely called reliable. The declared resource is 300–350,000 kilometers. Diesel engines look preferable to gasoline units in terms of fuel consumption. However, the high cost of maintenance and the capricious DCI fuel system make these engines not much more economical than gasoline ones. Among the main disadvantages, a high probability of injector failure at a range of 70–100,000 kilometers can be noted. The worse the quality of the fuel used, the less resource. The elements of the DEFI fuel system are especially vulnerable. If faulty injectors are not changed for a long time, this can lead to rotation of the piston liners. The turbine is another weak point of these engines. On some instances, it fell into disrepair after 60,000 kilometers of run. Also, it is worth noting the high probability of early failure of the EGR valve and injection pump. Another problem that owners of cars with diesel engines face is the small resource of the particular filter. The cost of a new filter scared even wealthy owners, so many remove it when the first signs of a malfunction appear. If you do not change the oil in a timely manner, extending the change intervals can turn the connection rod bearings. In fairness, it should be said that most problems are likely only with poor quality service. Therefore, when buying a car with DCI, you should change the oil, filters, etc. in time. In general, everything you need and refuel at proven gas stations. Renault Fluence was equipped with 5 and 6-speed mechanics, 4-speed automatic transmission and variator, installed with a 2-liter engine and restyled 1.6. The mechanical transmission is generally reliable, but on some copies of the first years of production, the owners called it jerking at the start after a long traffic jam. The problem could only be solved by replacing the clutch kit. Closer to 80,000 kilometers, the clutch master cylinder and release bearing may require attention. After 100,000 kilometers of run, the bearings begin to make noise, but this does not affect the performance of the transmission. If the advent of cold weather after a long parking, the gearshift lever starts to walk tight, it is necessary to lubricate or replace the cabin. The reason is that moisture gets into the casing in which the cable moves and freezes. The clutch takes care of more than 100,000 kilometers. The automatic transmission is not a very successful unit, and its resource largely depends on the driving style and service intervals. The main disadvantage of this type of transmission is jerking, and jerking during gear changes. Most often, the culprit for this behavior of the machine is the incorrect operation of the pressure modulation solenoid valve. It is also worth noting the unsuccessful design of the hydraulic unit. All this is aggravated by overheating, the Renault overheating sensors, and the tight setting of the GTR blocking. The CVT Jetco in terms of reliability looks preferable to the classic automatic transmission, but despite this it cannot be called problem-free. So, for example, under heavy loads, cold races, long driving at maximum speed, etc., there is a high probability of early transmission failure due to damage to the constant chain. With small runs up to 100,000 kilometers, at low revs up to 1,500, the variator may start to creak, gnash. This is due to sagging of the belt. To fix the problem, you need to update the software of the transmission control unit. Also, on a run of up to 100,000 kilometers, the pressure-reducing valve of the variator pump may fail. Jerks appear, the sun gear of the planetary gear and bearings. With careful operation and timely maintenance, 50–60,000 kilometers, the variator can last more than 200,000 kilometers without expensive repairs. Renault Fluence is equipped with a semi-independent suspension, McPherson strut in front, torsion beam in the back. As for the reliability of the suspension, in general it has proven itself on the positive side, but with the advent of cold weather it can bother with extraneous squeaks and knocks. Cars assembled in Turkey have a small ground clearance of 125 mm. If ground clearance plays an important role for you, you can eliminate the disadvantage by installing racks from Renault Laguna with increased ground clearance. If you do not take into account with stabilizer struts and bushings, on average they serve 30–50,000 kilometers, then the first suspension repair will have to be done no earlier than 80–100,000 kilometers. The main weak point of the suspension is the boot of shock absorbers. It can begin to exfoliate after 30,000 kilometers. The problem is solved by installing anthers from the VAZ 2110 and fenders from the VAZ 2108. With the timely elimination of the defect, the shock absorbers would last at least 80,000 kilometers. For careful drivers, the struts are replaced on a run of 120–150,000 kilometers. Ball bearings, silent blocks of levers and other rubber bands, as a rule, change after 90–100,000 kilometers. In the steering system, the first problems appear closer to 150,000 kilometers. The rake begins to knock. It is also possible the appearance of extraneous knocks due to problems in the spline connection gives to the steering wheel while driving on rough roads. The brake system has one interesting feature. The rear hubs are made integral with the brake discs. Fortunately, the resource of these parts does not differ much, 120–150,000 kilometers. In cars with a 2-liter engine, due to an unsuccessful location, the vacuum hose valve may freeze. As a result, the pedal becomes tight or may not be pressed at all. To protect yourself from possible troubles, it is recommended to put an additional casing of the hose. Despite the low cost of the car, the quality of finishing materials does not raise any questions. The only thing that can be criticized a little is the lacerate from which the steering wheel braid and seat upholstery are made. It quickly loses its presentation, and cracks appear on the sidewall of the seats over time. As for acoustic comfort, the cabin seems quite against the background of classmates. Over the years, the silence can be broken by the headrests of the front seats, the armrest and the trim in the area of U200B, U200B DHE seat belts. A creak appear. In the cold season, many complain of the freezing left leg. To eliminate the drawback, it is necessary to close the gaps between the duct pipes. Of the weak points of the Renault Fluence electrical equipment, a small resource of the heater motor can be noted. It starts to make noise by 100,000 kilometers. Repairing a motor is not cheap, requiring a manifold replacement, but buying a new one will cost even more, about $300. After 3–5 years of operation, the range of keyless entry decreases. The reason is that the contacts in the key antenna are oxidized, not famous for reliability and external temperature sensors. If the sensor is faulty, the climate system may not work properly. There are also malfunctions in the audio system. It spontaneously turns off, resets the settings, turns off the speakers. If the car often bothers with minor malfunctions in electric system, check whether the terminals are well connected to the battery. Usually, the reason is in them. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problem that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.